While Buck Rogers in the 25th Century may never go down in the history books as one of television's finest moments, if you were a sci-fi obsessed teenager in the late 70s, you were most likely a fan of the show. Sure, it wasn't Star Wars or Battlestar Galactica, but it wasn't trying to be. Instead, this was a show that focused purely on fun. In this particular version of Buck Rogers, Gil Gerard was really wonderful as the titular character, and even better, if you ask me, was Erin Gray, who played a strong and forceful woman, Colonel Wilma Deering. And then, of course, there was the draconian Empress of Evil, Princess Ardala, played to absolute perfection by Pamela Hensley. During the first season of the show, so many wonderful guest stars made an appearance, including the always amazing Jack Palance in an episode titled Planet of the Slave Girls. You really think I was going to miss that episode? No way. Jamie Lee Curtis, Roddy McDowall, Marky Post, and even the original Buck Rogers, Buster Crabbe, showed up and gave their all for that program during season 1. And yes, while there were a couple of episodes that weren't all that great, the fact that Princess Ardala made multiple appearances during that first season caused me to have a very forgiving heart. You get it, right? Season 1 of Buck Rogers was so darn good, but the show's second season, well, some folks think that the less said, the better. So let's take a look at what happened. Just what exactly ruined Buck Rogers. During season 1 of Buck, it seemed like show producer Glenn A. Larson took the lessons that he'd learned from Battlestar Galactica and turned Buck Rogers into something very different. With the most important lesson being that he made sure that Buck Rogers in the 25th century had a keen sense of fun. When season 2 was delayed because of a writer's strike, I contented myself to read about the upcoming season in Starlog and other magazines like that. The articles teased that the show was going to try and be more like Star Trek. At the time, I thought that sounded promising and I couldn't wait. I also remember reading that this guy here, industry vet John Mantley, would be the new showrunner for Buck's sophomore season. Now looking back, I realized that I was waiting for a show that would never return. Because whatever the heck the show was that returned in its place, well, it was not my Buck Rogers. It was a freaking imposter. Now, I'm not blaming all of the changes on Mantley. There were far too many for it to have just been his fault. But I do think he was at least partially responsible for ruining the show. How, you ask? Well, let me start counting down the changes. Big changes, little changes. There were just so darn many. Perhaps the greatest crime of season 2 was the complete absence of Princess Ardala. I'm not sure who thought this was a good idea. Apparently during the writer's strike, the princess either died, was abducted, or just finally gave up on the idea of wooing Buck to the draconian way of life because Princess Ardala was completely, entirely, absolutely missing for the entirety of the second season. Where, oh where did you go, my lovely but evil princess? And I guess I've got to talk about this guy. I know there are those out there who like Hawk, and I get it. He really wasn't a bad character. The reason I don't like Hawk all that much is because he represents everything that went wrong with season 2. I know I shouldn't blame him, but I do. I can't help it. I really can't. And to this day, I will never understand why famed voice actor Mel Blanc left the show after season 1. The first time Twiki spoke during season 2, I literally fell to the ground in shock. That didn't sound like Twiki at all. No attempt was made to try and sound like the Twiki of season 1. Didn't they care? Did they really think that we wouldn't care? Fortunately, there was enough of an uproar that Blanc did return to voice Twiki for the final handful of episodes during season 2, but it was too little, too late. I mentioned earlier that I remember reading that the plan was to take Buck Rogers in the direction of the Star Trek TV series. Apparently, Mantley and the rest of the show's creative team even toyed with the idea of not bringing Erin Gray back as Wilma Deering for season 2. It was only after Gil Gerard suggested that he wouldn't continue as Buck if Gray's contract wasn't renewed that Wilma was written back into season 2's scripts. And I'm not even going to mention the horrible outfits that they had Wilma wear during season 2. Oh wait, I just did. Drat. Like Star Trek, the show tried to take on themes that were far more topical. There were lessons that had to be learned. However, for me as a young teenage boy, the only lesson that I fully learned during that ill-fated second season of the show was that it was no longer fun. The playfulness of the first season, the joy, the sense of wonder, it was all gone. Somehow one of my favorite shows had been completely ruined. Like I said earlier, I don't place all of the blame on the new showrunner. Truthfully, I feel like the biggest culprit was nothing more than time itself. Because of the writer's strike, everyone involved in the show had time to reflect on the first season, and wouldn't you know it, everybody had ideas about how it could be improved. You've heard the old adage, don't fix what isn't broke? Well, those words of wisdom were definitely true when it came to Buck Rogers in the 25th century. These days, if I go back and revisit Buck Rogers, I usually opt for something from the first season, like this episode here where Wilma was terrorized by a space vampire. Look at the sheer terror on her face. Will she succumb to the weird hypnotic charms of some sort of interstellar Nosferatu? Now that's the kind of high-quality entertainment that we needed way back then and still need today. Hey, I've got a couple more videos that I think you'll really like. Here they are. Go ahead and click on them. I'm pretty much done here. Thanks so much for watching.